Well, we finally made it. Training camp is here and there are so many storylines to follow, but even one day into it, this rookie is already the storyline of camp? Plus, Nick Sirianni shared his thoughts on the running back battle and who's making moves at safety and linebacker. We also may have a new kick returner, so let's talk about it. But first, let's run it. What's up, guys? I'm Josh and I cover the Birds. Training camp is here, thank goodness. The Eagles report today with first practices beginning tomorrow, Wednesday, July 26th at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. In fact, every practice will be held at 10 a.m. with the lone exception of the open practice to the public at the Link August 6th at 7 p.m. And kudos to those of you who have tickets to the event. I'm wondering if we'll have fireworks like we did last year. It's worth noting that the Eagles will only have 9 scheduled training camp practices plus 5 walkthroughs, and then, as Jimmy Kimsky points out, likely 2 joint practices with the Browns and the Colts. For those wondering, yes, there will be a couple more practices after the preseason, but not a lot, especially given their low number of injuries the last 2 seasons and a pair of Week 1 wins.
It's science.
All right, it might not be completely, but there's probably something to it, since after all, the Birds were the 3rd healthiest team in the NFL last season. I mean, it's fun to see the guys in action, although I'm willing to sacrifice footage for a healthy roster. Be that as it may, there's one player who is unsurprisingly expected to be the story of camp. Well, at least according to NBC's Reuben Frank anyway, since he said all the way back in May that Jalen Carter is going to be creating all the buzz at camp. And the only regret is that it's not still held at Lehigh, so every Eagles fan could watch it every day. Yeah, it'd be nice to be able to watch the best DT on the roster practice every single day. Maybe it's a bit early to say that, but like Zach Berman of The Athletic said last week, it wouldn't surprise him if at the end of the season, JC's the top defensive tackle on the roster. After all, we've seen how Jalen attacked OTAs and quite literally destroyed a blocking sled.
Jalen Carter's, I think he broke a blocking sled in the first weekend, the rookie weekend. I think that's what I heard.
Okay, you're right. The sled still lives, and Spadero said it was more of a figure of speech, but aren't we ready to see what the Breadman does against real live competition? I don't think John McMullen's crazy thinking Jalen schools some people in one-on-ones during camp. It also wouldn't surprise me if Nolan Smith continues to make headlines because, like most of the youth on this team, his potential is incalculable. Okay, it's a lot, but what do you think? Which rook will end up being the story of camp? Or what if it's actually Jordan Let's Get Freaky Davis, better known as the Dancing Bear by Nolan Smith? However, putting the nicknames aside, Pro Football Focus is really high on the second-year monster, ranking him as the 19th best interior defender in the league, despite only playing 270 snaps because of the massive potential he possesses. I've talked about it before, but I think JD played well last season before the injury. It's just that the stakes have been raised and we need him to take his game to the next level. But JD knows that though and says he's ready to meet those expectations, saying, I understand you're asking a lot more of me, and that's okay. That's what I'm here for. I'm lucky I had the experiences behind the vets to see what it took last year, and now just trying to take those lessons that they gave me and not let it go to waste. Davis said he's watched an insane amount of film since the end of the season, which helped him to realize flaws in his technique, but now he expects to be able to come in sharp and focused so that he can set a great example for all the new guys. I'll just say I'm here for it, and I think the most of us realize playing D-line doesn't always translate in your first couple years, yet with a year under his belt, I expect big things from the big dude. Question for you though, do you think JD has a bigger year or Milton Williams establishes himself as the breakout candidate on Philly's defensive front? According to The Athletic's Bo Wolf, he's leaning toward the 3rd-year player due to the fact that Williams has looked good as a rotational player with 6 total sacks and 12 QB hits across his first 2 seasons. Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis will be the headliners for this young interior, but the supremely athletic Williams will have a chance to make an impact after dealing with some nagging injuries for parts of 2022. Let's be honest, it's easy to get overlooked on a squad with this much talent, but like Wolf mentioned, Williams has crazy potential. Remember, this is the guy who posted the fastest 40 time by a DT at his pro day running a 4.63 and also made 500 pounds on the bench press look pretty easy before the draft, so the athletic pieces are there. By the way, I don't know if 500 pounds is super rare for interior defensive linemen since they're a group with some of the most freakish strength on every team, but it sounds like a lot for us mere mortals. Either way, I think we'd all admit Williams has begun to show the ability to put it all together, so with his 3rd season ahead, I wouldn't be surprised if he puts up some really solid numbers. Who do you think will be more productive between JC, JD, and Williams this year? But that's just the beginning of the storylines to keep an eye on. We're all curious to see which running back wins out for the starting job. Will it be DeAndre Swift or Rashad Penny? Or how about the incumbent ball carrier Kenny Gainwell, since CBS Sports named Kenny G as the most likely to earn the starting job, despite Philly bringing in both Rashad Penny and DeAndre Swift this offseason because Penny has been persistently injured throughout his career and his contract contains just $600,000 in guaranteed money. Swift, meanwhile, was acquired for a swap of 7th round picks and a future 5th rounder 2 years down the line. Amazingly, the Eagles have probably invested more in Gainwell than either player, and we already know he has the trust of the coaching staff based on how he was used last season, especially in the playoffs. His career highs are just 68 carries and 101 touches, but if things break the right way, he could double that this year, given how efficient he's been, especially as a pass catcher, which would lead to a nice bump in production. Let's not forget, Reuben Frank said there's no doubt in his mind Kenny G can be a 60-catch guy in addition to everything he gives the Eagles as a ball carrier, since over the last 2 years, Gainwell has played only 629 snaps, just 18.5 per game, but has 56 catches on 79 targets. Gainwell is obviously very smooth as a pass catcher, sees the field well, understands where his blockers are, and is fast, slippery, elusive, and tough. He had issues with drops in training camp last summer, but had only 2 drops during the regular season, and Jalen Hurts seems to really trust him on 3rd down. And the stats back it up too, because since 1990, only 4 backs have been drafted in the 5th round or later and had 500 rushing yards, 50 catches, and a 4.4 average in their first 2 years. Terry Allen, Terrell Davis, Jordan Howard, and Gainwell. Only Gainwell wasn't a starter, so sure, it's easy to get excited about the new additions like Swift and Penny, yet just another reminder to not write off playoff Kenny completely. Personally, I think the group is a running back by committee and super effective, but even head coach Nick Sirianni isn't committing on which approach they'll take, saying recently, whatever works. I'm okay having a committee, I'm okay having a guy getting all the carries too. Whatever's working, whatever's going well. We'll say at times we're going to go here, and then a guy gets hot and we'll roll with him. For example, Kenny in the playoffs a little bit last year, he got more touches than he had gotten previously because he was running it really well. I'm content with whatever's working and playing the best guys. I love the depth we have to be able to rotate guys and keep them fresh. I like when you have a guy that can do all of it, and I like when you have a guy that you can segment it. That versatility will be huge, and it'll be interesting to see how this shakes out over the next several days, but go ahead and drop your name in the comments for the favorite to win out in camp as the RB1. I think this is the part where I should point out that it's important to not overreact based on the first day or even the first week of camp.
Right, I'm probably just overreacting.
We'll typically see the vets getting most of the first team reps before the coaches start to work in other rotations, but I'm hopeful one of those rotations is rookie Sidney Brown. You guys know how I feel about the former Illinois safety, the most athletic DB tested at the combine, which had me elated just like Ray Didinger was for the Eagles getting a dang good football player. Now, it's worth mentioning Sidney mostly received 2nd and 3rd team reps during OTAs, with Philly trying to kind of ease him into a safety role and not overwhelm him too quickly. Although remember, the squad sees loads of potential, with rumors of the Birds seeing a lot of the all-pro Budda Baker in Brown. This is definitely one of the camp battles I'll have my eye on, and sprinkle a little bit of Kelee Ringo in there as well. After all, he spent a lot of time with Baker, since the expectation is that he'll cross-train at both corner and safety. I've talked about it a lot recently in other videos, so feel free to go check them out, but I still think it's more than likely that we'll see Reed Blankenship and Terrell Edmunds start, although Brown will be very close to earning a starting role and probably will at some point this season. Is that crazy? I don't know. Is it as crazy as thinking Nicholas Morrow may not start next to Nakobe Dean? Obviously, this is the other massive question mark that we'll be watching very closely during camp, with Nakobe Dean having the target on his back as the green dot man and being promoted, so no longer viewed as the water ice carrier guy.
Thank God.
I think as he goes this season, the rest of the defense goes. And that's a good thing, quite frankly, because I see him having a really strong season while collecting an absurd amount of tackles. Although it is big shoes to fill of Kaiser White and TJ Edwards, who's now in Chicago, but I transparently am not worried at all. It's actually the Chicago switcheroo we did signing Nicholas Morrow that has me slightly more concerned. I think Morrow can be solid, but like I've mentioned before, and we've heard since OTAs, it's Christian Ellis who's been trending in the right direction. And CBS Sports' Jeff Kerr doesn't even think Morrow is going to start because of the unguaranteed money bit in his contract, and believes the Birds will try to add somebody. All right, I'm probably not in that place yet. However, if we're getting through camp and Howie doesn't like what he sees, then 100% he's going to make a move for another linebacker. I'll put this out there again, and you guys can hold me accountable and come back and tell me how wrong I was, but I think Christian Ellis finds his way into a starting role. Or why wait? Just tell me how stupid that is now.
I'm an idiot!
So many questions, and another one I'm curious about is how will the Eagles handle the right guard position? With last year's Jason Kelce's replacement still having to wait for the future Hall of Famer to retire, Cam Jurgens has got to be the odds-on favorite to start at right guard right now. It also can't be overstated how important the whole extra year to learn from O-line coach Jeff Stoutland is, although I guess it's not improbable that Steen could wind up starting, with the Athletic's Zach Berman saying there's a legitimate reason to be excited about Mean Steen. Starting at left tackle at Alabama is kind of more than enough on the resume. And then you look at the off-the-charts athleticism the guy possesses and say, yeah, it's feasible to see the Rook slot in next to Kelce and Lane. Either way, the offensive line is one of the least worrisome groups, to me, among the unknowns at this point. Do you agree or disagree? And speaking of unknowns, add the wide receiver 3 battle to the plethora of potential possibilities. Sorry, I got carried away. But it's a legitimate question we're all wondering about, whether Quez Watkins can exercise the demons and perform in big moments. Or will the newcomer Olamide, the Wizard Zacchaeus, unseat the incumbent as Jalen Hurts' third favorite target? Or fourth? Fifth? Wherever you'd rank him, it's still a vital piece, even with all these offensive weapons. I think it'll be Quez starting, although the Eagles don't seem completely content with the receiver position. After inviting XFL wide receiver Javonta Payton for a tryout ahead of camp. In case you're not familiar with Payton, he played at Mississippi State, catching 19 passes for 225 yards and 1 touchdown before transferring to Tennessee, where he then grabbed 18 balls for 413 yards and 6 touchdowns. It's worth noting that Payton spent the 2022 NFL season with the Arizona Cardinals, but that didn't really work out. So he joined the XFL's Arlington Renegades and Orlando Guardians this past year, hauling in 11 catches for 164 yards. At this point, you're probably saying, wow, that's not a very impressive stat sheet, which is true, yet his bio from Tennessee described him as a versatile big play wide receiver and special teams contributor who is no stranger to the SEC. When I first heard the news about Javonta Payton, it was a bit curious because how many wide receivers does one team need?
Is there a limit?
Maybe not, but we have 11 already, so Payton would make 12 if the Birds sign him unless they cut one of them, since the Eagles are already at the roster max, and a signing would require releasing one of the 89 guys. For context, Philly's at 89 with O-lineman Josh Sills on a special exemption until determining the ramifications of his trial date next week. But back to Payton, it's the last part of his bio that Jeffrey Knox says he has working for him, since the 6'1", 180-pound player showed some talent as a returner at Mississippi State, with 10 career kick returns resulting in 203 return yards. While I agree that's the reason the Eagles probably brought him in for a workout, let's also admit those are not stellar numbers for a returner. It feels like the Birds are grasping at straws and desperate to find a legit return option, so I'm in favor of leaving no stone unturned, but I don't really think Payton is the answer. How about you all, though? In the meantime, the Eagles' Twitter account decided to piss everyone off, except I guess there's no one to blame but ourselves, since more people voted for memes that don't reveal anything about the Kelee Greens, which then led to the first of many uninformative posts we're bound to get this week. If nothing else, perhaps that let us know the release date is more than likely August 1st, since they're admitting nothing's coming for another week. I don't know why it's taken so long, because every other team has seemingly shared their kits by this point. At least camp is here, so we've got better things to worry about. This has been the Philly Special.